My name is Sadie, 35 years old, currently living in Boston and working as a music teacher. I never thought there would come a day when, in the very house where I grew up, I would feel like a stranger. It was my mother's birthday party, a night that should have been warm and joyful, with candlelight glowing, the table covered in a white cloth, relatives chatting and laughing. But in the middle of that laughter, I froze when I saw three strange men carrying straps, gloves, and heavy protective covers step into the living room. They walked straight toward my grandmother's piano, the mahogany instrument I had grown up with, where every note was tied to a memory. In front of everyone, my father raised his glass of wine and declared, "Tonight, the piano will be sold to fund Claire's European tour." The table erupted in applause. And me? I was speechless. It felt like someone had torn away a part of me right in the middle of the noisy laughter. Have you ever had something sacred taken from you by your own family, without anyone asking for your opinion? Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? If you've been through something like that, leave a comment below. Hit like and subscribe if you want to hear the rest of my story. Because after that night, I was no longer the weak Sadie they thought I was. And that piano would not be taken from me as easily as they imagined. I walked across the old patterned rug into the living room, my footsteps silent but my heartbeat pounding in my chest. Inside, under the soft golden lights and the clinking of glasses, three burly men were removing their gloves, checking the straps, and labeling the protective crates they had set beside the piano. My grandmother's piano. The piano I had sat at since I was small enough that my legs dangled above the floor, long before I could even reach the keys properly, and where I grew up as every note fell onto the wooden floor like another breath. I stared in disbelief, lips dry, unable to speak. My mother stood at the head of the table, her face glowing as if she were hosting a grand celebration. My father beamed with pride, raising his champagne glass above his head as the background music faded. "We have a special announcement," he said solemnly. "Tonight, my mother's precious piano, the woman we all loved and respected, will begin a new journey. A journey to sponsor Claire's musical dream." Applause broke out almost instantly. Uncle Rick, Aunt Marion, even Cousin Sylvia, people who had listened to me play all through my childhood, clapped as if this were perfectly natural. I turned toward the piano, the lights reflecting on its dark varnish, making it look as though it were quietly retreating from the room. No one looked at me. No one asked me. One of the movers, wearing a dark blue jacket, walked toward the piano with a measuring tape in hand. I rushed forward instinctively, blocking his path. "Stop. Who gave you permission to touch that?" Every eye turned toward me. My mother set her glass down, her expression uncertain, but her smile forced. "Sadie, don't cause a scene at your mother's birthday. We'll talk later." "Why later? Why not now?" I looked straight at my parents. "That piano is mine. It was my grandmother's gift. It's not something you can sell off and call it a sacrifice for someone else's future." That was when Claire came down the stairs, her navy dress brushing the floor, her soft curls falling over one shoulder. She walked to our parents, hooked her arm through our father's, then turned to me with a theatrical smile. "You're making this heavier than it needs to be. This is for art. I can't refuse an invitation to tour Europe. Opportunities like this only come once. And that opportunity has to be paid for by taking what belongs to someone else." I asked, my voice calm but each word cutting through the air. The room fell silent. My father stepped forward, his hand on my shoulder, light, yet full of control. "Sadie, you're an adult. You should understand that sometimes, for the good of the family, someone has to yield." I pulled his hand off my shoulder. It felt like brushing away years of dust from my own memories. "What you call yielding is the silence I've been forced into my entire life." Cousin Sylvia coughed softly, uncomfortable with how the party had derailed. Someone mentioned the cake in the kitchen, trying to pull things back on track. But I wasn't returning to the script. I walked to the piano, brushed my hand across the lid, my fingers trembling. I could feel the fine dust on the corners, the tiny scratches only someone who polished it weekly would recognize. Grandma taught me Chopin's Nocturne here, I whispered, though no one had asked. She didn't choose Claire, she chose me. Claire stepped closer, her smile fading. Don't turn this into a rivalry. Do you remember ruining my high school graduation performance? I looked straight at her. You walked on stage uninvited and sang over the piece I was playing. Everyone called it adorable, and I was pulled off stage for not being flexible. You're digging up the past, Claire muttered. Number, I'm reminding you of the truth everyone forgot or chose to forget. My mother moved in, her voice soothing. Sadie, darling, the piano has always been in this house. But Claire needs it more now. She needs to soar. And what about me? Grandma left it to me. I don't need to borrow it to fly. My mother's gaze hardened. My father crossed his arms. Claire stepped back. The room was silent again, the only sound the subtle scrape as the piano was shifted slightly out of its usual spot. I turned to the mover. If you touch that piano again, I'll call the police and report theft of personal property. Sadie, my father barked. Enough. This is our house. A piano. In this house belongs to the family. And am I not part of this family? No one answered. I stood tall, my body cold but my chest burning hot. The people around me, people who once praised me as a child, who begged me to play on holidays, now looked at me like I was in the way. They didn't see the child who had practiced until her fingers swelled just to play a perfect piece for her grandmother. None of them really saw me. I turned and stepped onto the back porch. The window let in a draft of night air, mixed with the scent of wood, burnt candles, and leftover wine. I needed to breathe. I needed to remember who I was before everyone decided for me. When I went back into the living room, the piano was still there. But I knew my time was running out. They wouldn't stop. They would find a way to take everything unless I stood up and began defending myself. I stood in the shadows of the porch, watching the golden light spill from the living room through the curtains. The air outside was chilly but far easier to breathe than the suffocating weight in my chest. In my head, Claire's voice echoed, dripping with performance. Opportunities like this don't come often. A European tour will open doors for me. Everything I've worked for has been for this moment. Worked for? I almost laughed at the words. Claire had a naturally beautiful voice, no one denied that. But a beautiful voice is not art. It's a beginning. The path to artistry takes discipline, sacrifice, persistence. And she had never finished any path she started. I stepped back inside. The living room buzzed again with chatter and laughter. The piano was still there, but the movers were sipping the drinks my mother had brought them, as if nothing had happened earlier, like I was just a gust of wind passing through. Claire sat in the armchair by the window, legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand. She looked at me with a mix of pity and triumph. "Don't be angry with me," she said, sweetly. "I know you're attached to that piano, but I have dreams too. And this opportunity, it's too big to pass up. And that opportunity requires taking something that belongs to someone else." I asked, my tone even but my feelings unhidden. Her lips pressed together, her eyes darting toward our parents, who were chatting with Uncle Rick but still listening closely. She set her glass down on the coffee table. "I didn't take anything from you. That piano is in this house. Mom and Dad spoke with the appraiser, they have the right." "That piano was left to me by Grandma," I said, fists tightening. I was the only one she taught, the only one she entrusted with her practice notes. The piano isn't a family utility. It's an heirloom. Claire sighed, then smirked. "You always make everything so heavy. If you cling to the old, you'll never get far. If you chase art without foundation, the further you go, the more lost you'll be," I replied. My mother stepped between us, still trying to sound conciliatory. "Sadie, I understand you love that piano. But Claire needs to rise. You already have stability, your job, your apartment. Claire has nothing yet. As her sister, think of her. That sentence cut deep into an old wound. I had heard it all through childhood. You're the older sister, you must yield. Claire is younger, you must understand. Claire is gifted, you must support her. I had yielded so often that every important performance of mine had been interrupted. When I was 12, Grandma entered me in a district piano competition. I practiced 6 hours a day for 2 months, until the skin peeled from my fingers. But right before my performance, Claire, only 7, then wandered on stage in a pink dress and sang a children's song. She charmed the judges, the audience roared with applause. And my performance? Cut short because the program was running long. When I came home with third place, my mother hugged Claire and told me, "Don't be upset. Your sister brought honor to the family tonight." I still remember the tight pinch of my black shoes that night. I didn't cry. But I didn't touch the piano for 2 weeks afterward. Now, my father left Uncle Rick and stepped closer, standing beside my mother. "Sadie, you're a good music teacher, everyone acknowledges that. But Claire has something different, her voice is heaven sent. If we don't seize this, it will be wasted." I looked at him, the man still in his gray suit, his tie loosened after the party. The man who once listened to me play Schumann for an hour straight in high school, who once replaced the lamp bulb by my piano desk himself. But over the years, all the praise shifted to the dazzling younger daughter, with the standout voice, always knowing how to shine at the right time. "She has something different," he repeated, as if chanting a spell, not realizing he was using it to erase what belonged to me. "And does that difference come from effort?" I asked. "Or just from knowing how to cry at the right moment, how to charm with a smile, how to make people melt with sweetness?" Claire gasped. "You're insulting me." "No," I said. "I'm stating the truth you refuse to face." She shot to her feet, her face flushed, her voice cracking like someone cornered. "I'm tired of being compared to you. Everyone thinks you're calm, disciplined, serious. And me? Just an empty stage star. But do you know what it feels like to live in the shadow of someone who never breaks the rules?" I hadn't expected that. Claire, the one always spoiled, always uplifted, was now talking about my shadow? My mother gripped her hand tightly. "Don't say that, darling. We all love you." "Love?" Claire laughed bitterly. "Or is it just pressure dressed up as love? They can't put expectations on Sadie anymore. She's independent, stable, quiet, so they put them all on me. If I don't scream, no one even looks at me." No one spoke. Every sound was swallowed into the space between us. I felt as though a curtain had dropped. No more the talented daughter, no more the dutiful sister. We were just two people who had grown up in the same house, each carrying our burdens in different ways. I walked over to the piano and gently lifted the lid. The cool ivory beneath my fingers seemed to be listening. I didn't play. I just rested my hands there, eyes closed. Claire was watching. My mother was watching. And my father, the very man who had just tried to push me out of my grandmother's legacy, was watching too. I opened my eyes, softly lowered the lid, and turned away. There was nothing more to say in that moment. I had heard enough to understand that some dreams are real, some are borrowed, and if people aren't careful, they'll sell off someone else's memories to chase an illusion they don't even fully understand. I sat in my old bedroom, the faded paint and warm yellow lamplight surrounding me. It was once my small world before I left this house for good. Outside, the chatter was fading. Relatives were leaving one by one, until only my parents and Claire remained, murmuring over empty glasses of wine words I no longer wanted to hear. I locked the door, then slipped quietly down the hallway, each step like a shadow over the wooden floor. My father's study sat at the end of the hall, the door slightly ajar, lamplight spilling over piles of papers on the desk. I had never been one to invade someone else's private space. But tonight, what they were hiding had gone far beyond a family argument. They weren't just planning to sell the piano. They had already set everything in motion, cut me out of the deal, and justified it with for your sister's future. I slid into the chair and powered up his laptop. It was slow to start, still showing the same old desktop photo, the whole family at a park, years ago. Claire, in the middle, glowing in a white dress, and me in the back, my hand on my mother's shoulder, my smile more habit than joy. I opened the email program. The password hadn't changed, it was still my mother's birthday. I wasn't surprised. The inbox appeared full of work files, bank correspondence, and a folder labeled MG Appraisal. My palms turned cold as I opened it, despite the lamp's warmth in the room. The subject line hit me like a stone. Final confirmation, deposit received. I clicked. Dear Mr. Walker, we confirm receipt of the $2,000 deposit for the Wilson Baby grand piano. Pickup scheduled for the 17th as discussed. Thank you, Martin Graves, Northeast Fine Instruments, $2,000. I leaned back in the chair, frozen. Just a few nights ago, over dinner, they said the piano had been appraised at nearly $16,000, and yet here was proof that a deposit so pitifully small had been accepted. That could only mean one thing. They had agreed to sell it for far less than its true value. I scrolled down. A long chain of emails unfolded, all under the heading, Offer Discussion, Wilson Piano. In one dated over 6 weeks ago, Martin Graves had written, the instrument is in decent condition but will require tonal restoration. I can offer a lower price if you need a quick sale. In the current market, a high asking price will be difficult to move. Below, my father's reply. I need this wrapped up within the month. The important thing is to keep this under the radar with my daughter. She lives out of town and doesn't visit often. Do not contact her directly under any circumstances. I bit my lip hard enough to draw blood. Not a single line named me as the rightful owner, as someone with a voice in the decision. They hadn't asked me, they had erased me from the entire process, as though I hadn't spent thousands of hours at that piano. I scrolled to the most recent message, just 3 days ago. The subject line was plain, but the content chilled me. Martin, everything is going smoothly. Claire and I discussed it, and we're set to close at $13,500. She's right. Sadie will never dare to fight back. I stopped reading. Each word scratched across the mirror image of my family, distorting it beyond recognition. Claire, the same sister who had clung to me when our grandmother died, who sobbed on my shoulder at the funeral, now assumed I was someone easily manipulated, someone who would bow if pressed. I couldn't even name what I felt. Anger, hurt, humiliation. But beneath it all, a sharper clarity rose. If they believed I would do nothing, it was time to show them they were wrong. I pulled out my phone, snapping screenshots of every email, every message, every receipt, every thread of deceit. I saved them into a private folder and forwarded a copy to my personal account. Then I found a file attachment named Private Appraisal, PDF. I opened it, a full report by Martin Graves, dated 1 month ago. This model, produced in 1968, is high grade with original mahogany casing and genuine ivory keys, never replaced. Market valuation, $18,000 to $21,000 depending on region. There it was. Undeniable. Martin Graves, the man my father had introduced as an old friend in the insurance business, was in fact a broker, flipping quality instruments at bargain prices for profit. I saved the file. Just then, footsteps sounded in the hall. I shut the screen and stood, pretending I hadn't touched a thing. The wooden door opened softly. Uncle Harold. He paused in the doorway, hands in the pockets of his wool sweater, eyes searching. What are you doing? I didn't answer right away. We held each other's gaze for several seconds. No harshness. No reproach. Just an old man who had lived long enough to recognize when a niece was hiding something and when she had reached the point of no longer bearing it. I need the truth, I said. He nodded, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him. Your father can be stubborn to the point of foolishness, he said slowly. And Claire, she grew up under the shadow of a model she could never grasp. But that doesn't mean they get to decide for you. My lips trembled. They said I wouldn't fight back. He wasn't surprised. He only nodded and laid a hand on my shoulder. Then prove them wrong. I looked at the darkened keyboard of my father's computer, where the lies had been planned and stored. And I saw more clearly than ever what I had to do, not for revenge, but to protect the truth my grandmother left behind, the truth I had carried all my life. Uncle Harold sat beside me, moving deliberately, each gesture weighted with thought. The room smelled of old wood and paper. I could hear my own breathing, heavy with the years of silence when no one stood on my side. I'm not surprised to see you here, I said, my eyes on the black screen. He smiled faintly, glasses slipping down his nose, his eyes sharp with unspoken understanding. I couldn't eat a bite tonight, he murmured, leaning back. Sadie, you've never asked for much. Claire, she's used to taking without asking. I looked toward the grandfather clock in the corner, its second hand ticking steadily, unmoved by human drama. I just didn't expect it to be plotted this far in advance, I said. Even the low price, they assumed I'd stay silent. Harold didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a small keyring from his pocket, wrapped in a worn gray handkerchief. He placed it carefully on the desk in front of me. Do you remember the safe deposit box your grandmother kept at the bank by the lake? I nodded. When I was 14, she once took me there, saying that one day I'd understand why she didn't keep everything in the house. I still remembered. The way she glanced at me in the rearview mirror, stern yet kind, her thin hand resting on an old jewelry case. After she passed, your mother never went to collect anything from that box, he continued. And I didn't want to interfere, but now it's different. I stared at the keys, my heartbeat slowing, as though the whole world had narrowed to that tiny bundle of metal wrapped in cloth. Did she tell you something? He was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I visited her a few weeks before she died. She sat at the piano, playing Chopin as if time hadn't touched her hands. Then she pointed to the piano and said, Sadie is the only one who listens to the music inside. The others only hear sound. I clenched my hands, holding back tears. She knew the family would fight over her legacy, he said. So she wrote a letter, signed it, and sealed it. It's in that box. She told me if anything ever happened to you, to take you to the bank. I met his eyes. For the first time all evening, I didn't feel alone. I'll go there soon, I said. But not yet. They're watching me. And you must prepare, he agreed. Not just with feelings, with clarity, with law, with strategy. I picked up the keys, the cold metal sparking something alive in me. No longer resignation, but a quiet determination rooting itself inside. Sadie, he said gently, they won't let go easily. The piano is only the excuse. They want you back in your old role, silent, compliant, out of the way. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the keys. I've played that role long enough. We sat there a while longer. I told him about the emails I'd uncovered, the proof of my parents' schemes, the line where Claire insisted I wouldn't resist. He wasn't surprised. He only sighed and asked, Do you have copies? I saved everything to my email and a USB, I said. I'll have Evelyn review them. Your law school friend? He asked, nodding with approval. Good. Someone who knows the law won't be fooled by emotional tricks. Family often uses love as a weapon. I smiled, my first real smile that evening. Not of triumph, but of finally breathing freely again. He stood, pulling his coat closed. Tomorrow, if you want me to come with you to the bank. I can go alone, I said. But if you're nearby, it makes me feel steadier. He squeezed my shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud. When he left, I remained still. Outside the window, the leaves swayed in the night wind. A car's hum faded down the small road beyond the yard. Everything seemed the same, yet I knew I wasn't in the same place anymore. I slipped the keys into my bag, pulled out my phone, and typed a message to Evelyn. Important discovery. Need to meet soon. I have Grandma's letter and the appraiser's file. This isn't just about the piano anymore. I sent it, set the phone down. The lamp still glowed, the clock ticked steadily, and in this house where my small hands once coaxed music into the air, a new chapter was quietly beginning, not with shouts, not with tears, but with an old key and a memory that had never faded. I left my parents' house the next morning, the bank key resting in my coat pocket, heavy as a vow to myself. The Boston sky was gray and hazy. The wind carried damp air from the Charles River across my face, sharp enough to wake me more than the black coffee I held in my hand. I had arranged to meet Evelyn at a small cafe near the Harvard Law Library, her usual weekend study spot. Evelyn was the only person besides Uncle Harold I could trust right now. We had known each other since high school, then studied together at the conservatory for 3 years before she turned toward law. A friend both practical and empathetic, sharp enough to catch every detail and thoughtful enough never to give hollow advice. She was already seated in the quietest corner, a civil, property law book in her hand, her hair tied neatly back, her dark sweater making her look older than her age. As I pulled out a chair, Evelyn looked up, her eyes locking onto mine without pretense. Something big happened, didn't it? I set my bag on the table, unzipped it, and handed her a USB along with printed emails, screenshots, and Martin Graves' appraisal report. My parents are selling Grandma's piano for nearly $7,000 under market value, I said softly. And they're doing it behind my back, no notice, no discussion, hiding it all by passing off the appraiser as some old friend. Evelyn didn't react immediately. She flipped through the pages, scanning each line as though she were reviewing a risky contract. Did they sign yet? Number, but they've already taken a deposit. She nodded, sliding her finger along the edge of the paper. The issue isn't just the price, it's ownership. If the piano is truly your personal property, backed by a gift letter from your grandmother or listed in her will, then they have no right to sell it. I pulled out the letter my grandmother had left me. The ivory-colored paper carried delicate but decisive handwriting. Evelyn read it carefully, her hand tightening slightly on the corner as if she were touching something sacred. There's a signature, a date, even an ink stamp, and a clear description of the piano. She looked up. This has legal weight, Sadie. I pressed my lips together, eyes drifting toward the cafe window where passers-by hurried past, collars pulled high against the early winter wind. Part of me wanted to spill everything then and there to let out years of silence, but another part stayed still, waiting for the right moment. Evelyn set the letter aside and pulled her laptop from her bag. Now comes the harder part. We need to check whose name appears on the family's property records. If the piano isn't listed under shared assets or covered under a joint insurance policy, then it belongs to the person named in the gift letter. I'm going to the bank tomorrow at noon, I told her. Uncle Harold gave me Grandma's safe deposit box key. If the original letter is there, everything will be crystal clear. Evelyn nodded. Then we can file for a hold on the transfer. And if necessary, I'll help draft a formal injunction. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. Claire did something else. Evelyn tilted her head, waiting. I suspect she used a fake certificate to get invited to the European tour. She never completed any formal vocal training. But the invitation email from the organizers emphasized they had reviewed recognized professional credentials. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. Do you have proof? Not yet, but I know how to check. I remember the admissions director for that program. He was a guest speaker at a seminar I attended last year. I'll try contacting him. Sadie, Evelyn studied me closely. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. It's turning into a web of lies that could hurt your reputation if you're not careful. That's why I haven't gone public, I replied. I'll wait until I have everything in hand, not to humiliate anyone, but to protect the piano, protect what Grandma left me, and to show them I won't stay silent. She nodded, her expression a blend of steel and kindness. Then the first step, I'll help you hire an independent appraiser, someone reputable with no ties to your family. That same afternoon, Evelyn connected me with Robert Jennings, a specialist in antique instruments. His small Cambridge office was filled with old sheet music and century-old ebony pianos gleaming under soft light. We arranged for him to inspect the piano Monday morning. I returned to my parents' house under the excuse of staying for a few days while my apartment's heating system was being repaired. They reluctantly agreed, though Claire's suspicious look was obvious. That evening, after everyone had gone upstairs, I sat alone in the living room. The piano glowed softly under the wall lamp, the polished wood seeming to breathe. I brushed a key, not playing, just feeling. 35 years in this house, and only now did I feel I was standing up for something truly mine. The next morning, Robert Jennings arrived. He was around 60, tall and slender, wearing white gloves, his eyes kind yet precise. After examining the piano's frame, strings, tone, finish, and serial number, he turned to me. This instrument has been well preserved, no structural damage, tonal quality still intact. If sold on the market, I'd value it between 18 and 20,000, depending on timing. I nodded, asking him to prepare a formal report. When he left, I printed 3 copies, one tucked into my coat, one locked in my document box, and one emailed directly to Evelyn. I stood still in the living room, eyes on the piano. My parents didn't yet know how far I had gone. Claire still assumed I would yield as always. But piece by piece, evidence was forming quietly behind them, and I, in silence, was taking control. I didn't intend to wake them, but I could no longer remain silent. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I sat at the bench, bare feet, on the cool wooden floor. The house was silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hall and the faint golden glow of the lamp reflecting off the time-worn mahogany surface. I lifted the lid slowly, each motion deliberate, almost ceremonial. My fingers touched the keys, my palms still warm from the tea cooling in the kitchen. No warm-up, no warning. I began playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The piano thundered like a storm tearing through silence. The opening chords pounded like knocks from the deep, shaking the house awake. My left hand struck the bass hard, each note reverberating against the walls, echoing up into the ceiling. I didn't restrain myself. I didn't need to be gentle. This was the piece I practiced when Grandma was alive. The one she said could only be played when you were ready to pour every ounce of anger, loneliness, and love into the keys. My right hand soared, racing through runs so fast there was no space between thought and movement. Chords surged and clashed, then broke off suddenly, like breath caught in the chest. My parents' bedroom door swung open as the piece reached its peak. Claire appeared moments later, eyes still heavy with sleep. My mother stood on the staircase, gripping the railing, the cold overhead light casting shadows across her face. No one spoke. I kept playing. The prelude ripped apart the night's rhythm, pulling the house into a vortex of sound. The notes poured out from my chest, urgent, unrelenting, unstoppable. No one dared interrupt. When the final chord fell, landing like a stone in still water, I lifted my hands, sitting tall, eyes fixed ahead. I didn't need to look at them to sense the shift, not moved, not regretful, but stunned. My mother spoke first, her voice low but stripped of tenderness. "Couldn't you wait until morning for this?" I turned, meeting her gaze. I wasn't working, I was playing, in Grandma's own house, on Grandma's own piano. Claire stepped closer, dropping onto the arm of the sofa, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. You woke us on purpose. I get it. You wanted us to feel guilty, but no one does. You play beautifully, no one denies that. But that doesn't mean the piano has to be yours. I held her eyes, my voice steady. The piano isn't mine because I play well. It's mine because Grandma left it to me in her letter, in her words, in everything she ever taught. And you know that. Claire shrugged, her lips curling faintly. I have the right to dream too, Sadie. My dream isn't just teaching kids music. I want to stand on real fight. Stages. Go farther than this old town. That's why I need the chance. And to take that chance, you need to destroy someone else's memories. Mom came down the stairs, each heavy step landing like a period at the end of a sentence. Sadie, don't turn this into a battle, she said, eyes fixed on me. You've always been too sensitive. Since you were a child. We don't hate the piano, and we don't hate you. But everyone has to grow up. Claire needs to go. That piano can't sit in the corner collecting dust forever. The piano isn't collecting dust, I said, my hand resting on the keys. Only people who can't see its worth would think that. My father appeared behind her, his hands in his pockets. He studied me for a long moment, then spoke in a flat voice. Sadie, you're the practical one. So think practically. Claire has an opportunity, and we don't have the money to fund both of you. We need you to step aside this time, for the bigger picture. I looked at each face before me, father, mother, sister. Each held a version of me in their minds, the obedient daughter, the accommodating sister, the quiet music teacher. But none of them had ever heard me play as I did tonight. None of them had ever seen me stand tall in the dark and refuse to bow. I've stepped aside my whole life, I said slowly. But not tonight. Claire shot up from her chair, her voice sharp. You played well, fine, but do you think one performance is going to change everything? I shook my head. I don't need a piece of music to change everything. I need the truth. And I already have it. All three of them fell silent. They didn't yet understand what I meant. And I didn't need to explain. Not yet. All I needed now was silence, the right kind of silence. Let the music speak for me. Let the quiet afterward force them to face it. I lowered the piano lid gently, not rushed, not angry. When the wood touched the frame, the house seemed to exhale a long, heavy breath. I rose, walked past them, my hands still warm from the keys. No one stopped me. No one signaled anything. I returned to my room and shut the door behind me, unlocked. No lock was needed. I had drawn a new boundary, and I would not let anyone cross it again. Not with the piano, not with Grandma's legacy, not with who I am. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of an upscale restaurant on the edge of the city, where my parents had rented the entire upper floor to host a celebration of Claire before her European tour. I walked in, clutching the strap of my dark brown leather bag, a chill running down my spine despite the warmth and laughter inside. Mom stood near the entrance, dressed in a deep blue dress with pearls, scanning the room like an event manager. When she saw me, her smile bloomed instantly but couldn't mask the flicker of unease in her eyes. You're here? Good. We're about to start the main program. I tilted my head. Am I on the program? She hesitated for a beat, then said, Claire thought it would be nicer with a familiar accompanist. You're here anyway, helping out won't be too much, will it? I didn't answer right away. Over her shoulder, I saw a group from the local newspaper setting up cameras near the stage. A long banner hung behind the podium, the city's new talent, Claire Walker and her international music tour. They'd even hired a videographer. I walked to the piano on the left side of the stage, a Yamaha C3, gleaming, perfect for this semi-classical setting. Everything staged to perfection, except me. Claire stood with a group of young friends near the cocktail tables, in a white lace dress and heels that made her look taller. When she noticed me, she nodded as if it were only natural. Summertime, you remember it? Same as before. Don't change the tempo, she said, her tone as casual as a director giving notes to a technician. I sat, tested a few chords. My touch was light, but I didn't look at her. Instead, I glanced across the hall and saw Evelyn sitting in the back row, holding a slim folder. She caught my eye and nodded once, steady as a heartbeat. When the ceremony began, my father stepped up to the podium, microphone in hand, his voice brimming with pride. Today, we gather to send our best wishes to Claire, our daughter, before she begins her musical journey in Europe. Claire is this city's sole representative in this year's Classical Artist Exchange program, and we couldn't be prouder. Applause filled the hall. Claire stepped into the spotlight, her smile dazzling, as if the lights had been made for her alone. I struck the opening chords of Summertime, exactly as she had asked, slow, steady, gentle. Claire's voice rose sweet and lilting, but by the second line the flaws were clear. Breath trailing late, pitch wavering, the higher notes straining. I adjusted the pace to pull her back into rhythm, but when the chorus came, I slipped the harmony into a new key. Just a half step enough to test anyone who hadn't practiced seriously. Claire faltered, her breath catching audibly. She glanced at me, her smile frozen, her eyes betraying panic. I kept my face calm, eyes fixed on the keys. I carried on, smooth and composed, forcing her to adapt. She stumbled twice, skipped a phrase, and landed flat on the final note. The applause afterward was polite, but uneven. Whispers rippled through the audience. I caught an older woman leaning to her neighbor, murmuring, "Her voice isn't steady, a bit immature for what they promised." I didn't feel triumph. Just something unlatched inside me, released. Claire walked straight off stage afterward, not waiting for congratulations. When I entered the makeshift dressing room, she was already there, waiting. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" "I played a classical variation," I replied. "Just a slight modulation. If you trained properly, it wouldn't have mattered." Her eyes flashed. "You think you've won? Doing that in front of everyone, with reporters, do you think you proved anything?" I met her gaze, my voice low but clear. I didn't need to prove anything. I just let the truth back onto the stage. "You want to be called an artist? Then you have to survive notes that aren't kind." The door opened. Mom entered, her composure slipping. "Sadie, you just humiliated Claire in front of the press. Do you understand how this could affect her tour?" I turned to her. "That tour was built on false credentials. If you truly cared about Claire's reputation, blaming me isn't the answer." Mom fell silent. Claire turned away, tears glistening but unshed. I stepped into the hallway, the late afternoon light washing the tiled walls in pale gold. Evelyn was waiting there, holding a printed file. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was confirmation from the tour organization, listing eligible participants. At the bottom, a note. Minimum requirement, certification of completion from a professional vocal training program. Claire didn't have that. I slid the paper into my bag, then looked out at the parking lot where lights were beginning to flicker on. A silent victory, no declaration, no celebration. The next morning, the house felt unnaturally still. Mom didn't call me down for breakfast. Claire kept to her room, no music, no heels tapping down the stairs. Dad sat at the table with a cup of coffee, untouched. I took the seat across from him, the wooden chair creaking softly. The tablecloth was crisp and white, but the only thing on it was a thin, bound packet of documents, placed squarely between us like an unspoken invitation. Dad slid the papers toward me. "Sign this. We need to finalize so the buyer can transfer the rest. The longer we drag this out, the messier it gets." I opened the first page, reading slowly. Seller's name, John Walker. No co-owner, no mention of me anywhere. "Who's the buyer?" I asked, my eyes on the page. "Martin Graves, the one you met." "Still him?" Dad nodded, not a flicker of hesitation. He's willing to be flexible, not demanding legal formalities. We don't need complications. I folded the papers shut, set them aside. Then, we already have complications. His brow furrowed. Mom appeared on the stairs, a gray shawl around her shoulders, her eyes sharp. Sadie, after what you pulled at the restaurant yesterday, you embarrassed us all. Don't make today the sequel. I stood, reached into my leather bag, and pulled out 3 large envelopes, each marked. I didn't bring trouble. I brought the truth, and here are 3 things that prove it. I laid them down on the table, one by one, like placing pieces on a chessboard already in play. First, I said, opening the first envelope, an independent appraisal from Robert Jennings, a nationally certified antique piano expert. He confirmed the market value of the piano is between $18,000 and $20,000 depending on condition. Meanwhile, Mr. Martin Graves only offered $13,500 and even took a $2,000 deposit without justifying the price cut. I handed the printed report to my father. He read a few lines, then set it down without a word. Second, I continued, opening the next envelope, the property insurance certificate under my name. I registered the piano for insurance 10 days ago after verifying the serial number against the original 1,968 records from the store where Grandma purchased it. My mother frowned. You insured family property without going through your parents? This isn't family property, I replied evenly, because I have a third item, the most important one. I opened the last envelope and took out a copy of Grandma's handwritten letter, sealed in clear plastic, her slanted handwriting as vivid as ever. She wrote this 3 years before she passed, signed it, dated it, stamped it. In the letter, she states clearly, I leave the Wilson baby grand piano to my granddaughter Sadie, the only one in the family who has shown true love for music and preserved its spirit. I laid the letter on the table. The room fell into silence. My father shifted in his chair, his eyes lingering on Grandma's words before turning to me, but he offered no rebuttal. We never knew this letter existed, my mother said, her voice unsteady. She left no formal will. A gift letter holds legal weight if the writer was of sound mind and the asset is specifically identified. I answered, glancing at Evelyn as she walked in right on cue, carrying a printed law book and a notepad. And this is Evelyn Chen, I added. My closest friend, a final-year law student at Harvard. She confirms, if there's a dispute, this documentation is enough to petition the court to suspend the sale and open a separate investigation into ownership. The front door opened. Martin Graves entered, briefcase in hand, polite smile on his face. We can begin signing, he started, but stopped when he sensed the tension thick in the living room. I stepped forward, handing him the 3 files. Take a look. If you still want to proceed with this purchase, you'd better clarify the ownership first. He scanned them quickly, his expression darkening. You're the actual owner? I'm the one named in the letter, the policyholder on the insurance, and the subject of an independent appraisal. If you proceed without addressing these documents, you could face charges for knowingly purchasing contested property. Martin Graves froze for a few seconds, then shook his head, his voice suddenly hard. I don't get involved in family disputes. Excuse me. I'm canceling this deal. It isn't worth the trouble. He turned on his heel and hurried out, leaving his briefcase slightly ajar behind him. My parents remained in their seats, drained, as if the strength had been pulled from their bodies. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply looked at them. The piano stays, not because I'm rebelling, not because I'm taking something from you, but because it's right, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it right. I slipped the letter back into my file folder and stepped away from the table. Evelyn followed quietly. As I passed the piano, morning light fell across its surface, casting a golden streak like a fine thread. I laid my hand gently on its frame, then kept walking. No one stopped me, no one called after me. I didn't need their acceptance. I only needed them to understand. Silence was over. What was mine would not be taken again. That afternoon, I returned to my small apartment, carrying the file folder heavy as stone in my hands. The piano still stood in my parents' house, safe for now. But inside me, something else still waited to be resolved. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email Evelyn had sent earlier, confirmation from the European tour organizers. I read the last line again. All applicants must submit certification of completed professional vocal training issued by an accredited institution. Claire had never had that certificate. She had never graduated from any formal program. I took a deep breath and sent my reply, attaching the proof. In the email, I included a scanned copy of the original records I had obtained through a contact in the system, showing Claire had dropped out after one semester. It was undeniable. Only a few hours later, my phone rang with an international number. A man's voice, English laced with a German accent, spoke briefly but clearly. "Thank you for the information. We have verified it. Miss Claire Walker has been disqualified from the program. An official announcement will be made within 24 hours." I dropped my head onto the desk, gripping the wood edge with both hands. Not triumph, but a mix of relief and sorrow. I knew this news would explode like a bomb in my parents' home. And it did. The next morning, the local paper's front page read, "City's musical talent disqualified from international program for invalid credentials." Beneath the headline was a photo of Claire at the party, in her white dress, smiling brightly, but the caption turned it into mockery. My phone buzzed nonstop. Mom called, Dad called, even Aunt Marion called. I ignored them, sitting by the window, watching the rush of people in the street below, wondering where all of this would lead. By afternoon, I had no choice but to return home. The moment I stepped inside, I saw Claire slumped on the couch, eyes red and swollen, hair a tangled mess, her phone tossed aside. Mom stood behind her, hands gripping her shoulders, as if to shield her from the storm outside. Dad paced back and forth, his face ashen, stripped of its usual confidence. I set my bag down, silent for a moment. Dad stopped pacing, his voice heavy. "What have you done, Sadie?" I looked straight at him. "I didn't do anything, I only revealed the truth. Claire never had valid credentials to join the program. The organizers verified and disqualified her." "You can't blame me." Claire lifted her head, tears shimmering. "You must be thrilled, right? You wanted to prove I was a fraud. You wanted me humiliated in front of the whole city." I sat across from her, my voice low but steady. "Do you think I enjoy reading those headlines? You're my sister. But you forged papers, put yourself in a place that was never yours. The truth would have come out whether I spoke or not." Mom gripped Claire's shoulders tighter, trying to hold back her tears. "She just wanted a chance. Why did you have to be so cruel, Sadie?" I turned to her. "What chance, Mom? A chance built on lies? If you truly loved Claire, you should have stopped her from the beginning instead of feeding this illusion. You and Dad pushed her here." Dad's brow furrowed, his voice sharp. "You're blaming us? Number..." "I'm stating the truth," I said, resting my hand on the cushion to steady myself. "I've heard you call Claire's voice heaven sent for years, building her belief that everything would come easy. But she never had the discipline, never trained, never earned a certificate, and now? The whole city is laughing." The room went still. Claire broke down, burying her face in her hands. Her voice came out broken, stripped of all its usual confidence. "I never really wanted to be a singer. I just wanted Mom and Dad to look at me with the pride they had for you when you played for Grandma. I didn't care about Europe or big stages. I just thought if I didn't shine, I'd be nothing in their eyes." I froze. Her words cut deep into my memory. Mom wept openly now, clutching Claire to her. Dad sank back, his hands trembling, his eyes distant. For the first time, they had no defense. I drew a long breath, then stepped closer to my sister. I didn't touch her, only stood near enough so she knew I wouldn't leave. Claire, you don't have to sing to be loved. You don't have to be someone else. But if you want music, start over from something real, not from forged papers. She looked up at me, her swollen eyes glistening in the yellow light from the ceiling. Do you think it's too late? It's never too late, I said gently. As long as you truly want it. Dad sat down, burying his face in his hands. His voice cracked, rough with regret. We were wrong. All these years, we put our faith in the wrong place. No one answered him, but the air in the room had shifted. The wall of silence and lies had cracked, revealing the fragile truth each of us had been hiding all along. I looked at the piano, standing silent in the corner of the Mallons' living room, a witness to everything. In that moment, I swore to myself, Grandma's legacy would never again be shamed. And the truth, however painful, would always have more power to heal than any lie. I decided to call a professional moving company. That morning, when the small truck pulled up in front of my parents' house, I stood on the porch watching three men carefully lift the piano, cover it with protective cloth, and secure it with strong straps. The Wilson baby grand was no longer a piece of property to be sold. It had become my heartbeat, beginning a new journey. As they left, my mother stood at the door, saying nothing. My father sat in his armchair, eyes following the piano, his face tight but without his usual commands. Claire stayed in her room, the door closed. I knew all three of them understood. The choice had been made, and there was no way back. That afternoon, the piano sat neatly in the corner of my small apartment near the window. When sunlight poured through the glass, the mahogany wood glowed a warm reddish-brown, like a strip of silk. I sat at the bench, laid my hands on the keys, and felt as though the whole room was breathing with me. I began taking a few students from the local community center. At first, just 2 children, then 5, then 10. The sound of young fingers on the keys filled the room, sometimes offbeat, sometimes clumsy, but it moved me more than any performance I'd ever given. The bright faces when they managed a full chord or played a short passage correctly, each one a reminder that music wasn't just for show, but for sharing. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a lesson, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Claire. She wore a simple sweater, dark circles still under her eyes, but her voice was softer. "Can I learn piano from you?" I looked at her, more surprised than angry. "Do you really want to?" Claire nodded. "I don't want to stand on stage pretending anymore, but I want to understand why you love music so much. If you'll teach me, I'll start from the beginning." I invited her in, brought her to the piano. When Claire placed her unsure fingers on the keys, I saw in her eyes not rivalry, but a longing to find something real. In the weeks that followed, we sat side by side. I corrected each movement. Claire laughed at her mistakes, then tried again patiently. For the first time, there was true listening between us. A few weeks later, my parents called unexpectedly, saying they wanted to visit. I hesitated, but agreed. That afternoon, they walked into my apartment, bringing neither commands nor pressure. They sat quietly on the sofa, their eyes fixed on the piano now in my space. "Could you play something for us?" my father asked, his voice low. I sat at the bench without a word. The late afternoon light streamed through the window, bathing the piano in gold. I chose Clair de Lune. The opening chords, soft as morning mist, spread through the room. I didn't look at anyone. I let the music speak. In my mother's face, I caught a trace of sadness, as if she realized all the things she had missed over the years. My father bowed his head, hands clasped, stripped of the authority he once carried. Claire sat nearby, eyes closed, silent in her listening. When the final note lingered and faded, the room remained quiet. No applause, no praise. But in that silence, I felt something I had never felt before. They were truly listening to me. I laid my hands on the keys and spoke softly, not to anyone in particular. Sometimes the quietest voice creates the strongest melody. The last light of day filled the room, on the piano, on my hands, on the empty spaces inside each of us. And in that moment, I knew Grandma was still here, in every note, in every silence turned into resonance. I wondered, if someone else were in my place, what would they choose? To stay silent and please everyone, or to stand up for what was right, even against family, pain, and harsh truths? Each person will have their own answer, and I truly want to hear yours. What would you do if the most sacred keepsake of your life was turned into a tool for someone else's ambition? Music has taught me this. Not every note is high, not every passage is grand. Sometimes, silence holds the greatest strength. And I believe life is the same. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I will read every word, because your experience might become someone else's strength. And if you want to hear more stories about family, about choices torn between love and truth, make sure to follow this channel so you won't miss them. There are still so many I want to tell, stories I believe will make us reflect and maybe find ourselves within them. Thank you for staying with me until the final note of this piece.